Good evening, Gophers, and welcome back to yet another episode of Sky U Pod, your college huddle Gopher football podcast. As always, we ask you to please like and subscribe to the channel, and wherever you can on where you're listening to the podcast. Also, the collegehuddle.com has a ton of articles on for your consumption to give college. So please give collegehuddle.com a visit to read all things college football, listen to other podcasts, and maybe even get involved with our community. But with that being said, fellas, how are we doing today?
Doing really good. We will not be doing debate coverage tonight. That's not what we're here for. But thank you for the suggestion. I feel great. It's another day closer to Gopher football. I'm excited to talk about this game. Got Avril Lavigne on Thursday night. Got a kid on the way.
Ooh.
Life's good right now.
Good,
Where's that
good.
concert at?
The Armory, which I've never actually been to for a
Oh,
concert, but
Good
nice.
venue.
yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. Well, good deal. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll just get right into it. We have a lot of good topics to kind of cover tonight. The first being this PJ's weekly presser. Nothing major, but one of the interesting things that he said was touching on the rookie, Coy Perry. This is what he said. He's a sponge, quote. He loves to learn. He loves the game. We can feed him by the shovel, and right now, he can do that. He just absorbs it all. He's handling it well. I trust him 100%, and that's hard to earn. End quote. Fellas, do you think the time to start Coy is now?
Go ahead, Max.
Um, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, I guess, because we've only seen him a little bit just against a Rhode Island opponent. But he did have an interception. He did have one good punt return. I guess I can't say 100% right now that he should start, but I definitely think we should be seeing him in every game from here on out, at least in some capacity, and let him prove that he can earn a spot by playing in games. The safety position was a big question mark coming in, and if he can, be that playmaker back in the secondary, then I don't see why not. I don't see why we have to save his red shirt.
Yeah, I think he's pretty close, just with how the coaches are talking about him here post Rhode Island game, and just their comments to him leading up to the game as well, and then seeing him play, obviously. So you got Darius Green, who's banged up and out, and I think that's going to be a major factor on if he's going to be like a starter or not. Darius Green, kind of a different type of safety than Coy. Coy's more athletic and faster overall, it seems, at least. And Darius Green's more of a thumper, more of a strong safety coming down to the box, hitting running backs and stuff like that. So I think Coy's battle as far as getting on the field more might be if, like, Gooseby can't stay over the top on guys, which, he made the pick on that play, which is a great play, but the guy, he did get beat kind of as well on that play. So I just think stuff like that, and as Coy goes along and gains the coach's trust, that he could edge out guys like that. Now, they're still really high on Gooseby, so I'm not just trying to single him out, but they seem to really like Kerry Brown. He played a lot last week, and then Coleman was also out there for most of it, and then I felt like Coy and Gooseby were kind of rotated in for that third safety that would come in. So Gooseby seems to be his primary competition now with Green out, and if he keeps learning, like PJ says, I think by midseason he will definitely be a starter. But obviously we'll let the coaches make that decision when it's time.
Yeah, one of the things that I believe PJ when he says it is he has to trust his players in order for him to, have them play in the game. I do believe that. I think that's also part of the reason why we, in years past, we didn't really see a lot of receivers get involved, frankly. I think that part of him really believes that he has to believe that you are going to, take care of the football, make some plays, and know what we're trying to accomplish on offense or defense, whatever that is. So him saying that, it does make me believe that he will definitely have a bigger role on this defense. I don't know if he'll start right away. He'll definitely get involved, I think, but it's hard for me to envision a scenario where he's not probably starting or getting the bulk of the snaps at some point this season, unless he just is totally lost out there, isn't really prepared, whatever it may be. But from what we've seen, he loves to play. He's athletic, like you said, Kurt. He seems ready. Why not kind of give him more reps and then eventually give him the keys and go from there? So
he definitely seems to have the highest
happen.
Ceiling out of any of those guys back
Certainly.
there at the moment. Kerry Brown's still young. Goosby's still young too, and Coleman's in his third year, so a lot of upside in that room. Just gotta. I'm just worried about the big plays, but they've been on top of that so far this year.
I kind of a side note. I wonder if one day, if they all, craziness of the transfer portal, if we have all this young talent next year, what does that look like for the secondary? Do we have someone try corner? What do we do? I feel, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Kerry Brown seems the most versatile as far as probably sliding to other positions. I mean, maybe Coy could be like the nickel out there, like the slot corner that Henderson plays on sometimes, but they really like the bodies they got back there. I mean, they're all getting rotated in when they're healthy. Right. So, but yeah, it's a fair point to make.
Yeah. Secondly, along with the presser, anything else that PJ said that stands out to me personally is just another week kind of preview with Nevada coming up here, but I don't know. Just typical PJ, it seems like for me. Fellas, what do you think?
Go ahead, Max.
Go ahead. Oh. I was just going to say, this actually wasn't from the weekly presser. It was just from the post-game press conference that stood out. Was just he mentioned the Quinn Redding injury, and I think he was just asked about like other returners and who could be available to do punt returns and kick returns. And maybe he just didn't have enough time to think about it, but he kind of answered as if it was like he's hoping Quinn can be back to like step back into the returning role. Like it wasn't even a thought of like, well, maybe someone else will take it over. So that's kind of my takeaway to watch out for this game is like, if Quinn is healthy, is he returning kicks or are they going to rotate other guys in there?
I guess Coy's 25-plus yard punt return wasn't enough to
I was going to say, Gleb Coy, he's so athletic.
Yeah, that's a good point. For me, it was on today's presser or yesterday's presser, whenever it was. PJ again reemphasized being able to throw to open up the run, and he talked about how, once that was available to them because of the numbers in the box, they just let it flow, basically keep passing it because that's what was available to them, and you're going to need to be able to do that against Big Ten teams. So for me, maybe it was all talk. Again, you can't take too much of what PJ says for its word all the time in these press conferences. It's a lot of coach speak, a lot of just saying whatever floats into his mind. That's kind of what PJ does. But, to me, my hope is that shows that he is willing to just kind of open it up. Clearly they came in wanting to establish the run with Darius Taylor back, and it wasn't going that way. So then second half came around, and they didn't go back to the initial game plan. They just let it stay opened up. Keep throwing to the flat, keep throwing to the dig route to the tight end over the middle, trying some play action. They worked all that in. They just seemed more fluid, I guess, in their approach to this game. And PJ made it sound like they're going to stride towards keeping it that way, and I hope that's true.
Yeah. I totally agree. I guess the one thing that I'm kind of scratching my chin at is the fact that, is it more that they had men in the box or the fact that they were stopping the run?
Yeah.
Maybe both, but regardless, I'm glad that it happened.
Yeah, the part two to that would be, we started throwing the ball so much, it would have been nice to be able to establish a little bit more consistency in the run game there, I guess is an argument you can make. But, that the O-line's got to get going here. I'm sure we'll touch on that in a bit. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Something off of that too. PJ was asked about like if there was any concern around just the yards per rush and not really being able to dominate on the ground. And PJ's response was essentially like, "Well, teams are just keying in so much on the run and loading up the box," which is true to an extent, but they've been doing that for as long as PJ's been here, and it has yet to be a problem. Plus, it's Rhode Island, so I don't know. I think he's probably sticking up for his guys a little bit there, but something else to look out for.
Yeah, outing 24. O-line has been the biggest disappointment so far. Yeah, I'd agree. I think we've all touched on that.
Yeah.
It is my biggest concern heading in as we get closer to Big Ten play. But
Yeah, it's going to be a major problem once if we don't see any sort of improvement this week, especially. I mean, you got Iowa right out the gates, and you know that up front they're always good on both sides of the ball, so it's going to be a problem. But
well, something I was thinking about too, though, is like in years past, it seemed like the issues O lines were having on early on in the year were like stunts and people just coming in from different directions. And I don't even really feel like that's too much of the issue with this O line. And it's more of just they're not pushing people back off the line. It's like they're really big. They're all, 6'5", 300 plus pounds. It's just there's not a lot of push up front. The right guard spot's really a big issue for them right now, and just finding someone to go alongside Carroll. And I think the true sophomore Greg Johnson Greg Johnson could do a little bit better of getting a push as well. But yeah, something to monitor for sure, and could definitely hold back this team.
Yeah, and let's kind of transition to what Curtis was talking about here. The refreshing aspects of of last week's game was the passing game. Um, not only that, how spread out, how Brosmer was able to dish out the ball to pretty much every target that he had available to him. So we all know that Daniel Jackson is wide receiver number one. We know what he can do. He's phenomenal. But right now, fellas, who do you think will finish as the true wide receiver two by the end of the season, at least?
Yeah, well, right now, to me, I mean, he is number two technically in yards is Elijah Spencer, and he's one of the guys that seems to get thrown out there when it's like an obvious passing situation right away. So I think he's definitely a contender. A lot of people predicted that. I'm going to go with the Christian Driver kid, though, Donald Driver's son, transfer from Penn State. He's a guy that has just been running a lot of the more underneath routes and stuff to the flat. They try and get him the ball quicker, it seems like. So for that reason, I would predict, or at least say, that Christian Driver's got a decent chance at being receiver number two in this team by the end of the year. He just seems to be a guy that there are more designed plays to go to him. Obviously, Daniel Jackson gets the majority of the deeper routes off play action and whatnot, and he's just your best receiver in general, so he'll get the majority of the targets. But for me, I think Christian Driver is going to end up receiver number two, which is not something I thought I'd be saying at this point. And it's early, so a lot could change, but I would lean Christian Driver.
Yeah, could definitely see that. I do like a lot of the plays. It seem like we have designed for him too, are just those little slip routes into the flat off play action that a lot of teams run, and I feel like it's not a play that we've seen the last few years in our offense. So it's kind of nice that it's one of those where it's a high percentage play, especially in short yardage situations or in the goal line. So it has been kind of nice to see that that installed into the offense. Yeah, if I had to predict this number two, I guess I think I just had to stick with Elijah Spencer, not only just from his production so far, but he's from last year to this year, he's definitely proven to be one of the more productive guys with the ball in his hands. We always knew Daniel Jackson could make plays happen once he got the ball in his hands, whether it be, we were begging for just get him in an end around or a jet sweep or something. It doesn't have to be a deep ball. But Elijah Spencer's made a lot of guys miss in just 2 games. And so for that, I feel like there's just more you can do with him where you don't always have to just rely on him catching balls in the boundary that, we could hit him on a slant or a shorter route and he could make a guy miss. And he does have good speed too. So for that, I'd say Elijah Spencer. It's kind of, for me, it's between him and Brockington. But I feel like Brockington we can just utilize more on deep shots. She doesn't really have to be like the number 2 guy.
That's who Co's predict. I'm thinking Brockington if he can catch the ball. Yeah, I think all 3 guys we just mentioned between Brockington, Elijah, and Driver have all had drops this year. So it's definitely something that's got to get cleaned up between those guys in the running.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
As well, I don't think PJ likes drops. No one likes drops, and I think that goes kind of back to his trust that he talks about often. I will say, I feel like you're right, Kurt. Driver just seems to have a lot more. We can kind of dial up a lot of things based off of what he does, like whether that's kind of a quick drive, like it. Down the middle of the field or quick slants, whatever. He seems to be the guy to do that. I love Brockington's kind of breakout speed, deep shots. I trust him with that. He has the experience. But I feel like Spencer's ceiling probably out of those 3 might be the highest. We saw him miss that catch in the end zone against North Carolina. That really stunk. But aside from, drops from all of them, honestly, I think that, he probably is going to be the wide receiver number 2 when it's all said and done.
I think something Elijah Spencer does better than maybe any of them is just elevate for the football. Jackson does find it too. He's just not a very big framed guy. Elijah Spencer does have a little bit bigger of a frame. I think he just looks like, not a lot of them have had a chance to go up for a ball yet, but he just seems to look more fluid in going up for the football. So yeah, if they can all catch better, I think Elijah Spencer is a safe bet. But yeah, Coach chimes in. Driver does look reliable. Yeah, yeah, and maybe it's the routes he runs where it's just a little bit less contested catches. But I'm with you there. I think they're just Driver going in motion, being in the flat, maybe some jet sweeps, jet pass touch. Jet touch passes for him. Yeah.
What a great problem to have too, trying to figure out who our number 2 wide receiver is when we've got 3 maybe more options too.
It's early on. So I'm not trying to get overhyped, because it was Rhode Island where we finally got to see them use. But it does look like there are some legitimate options there, at least guys that can do some different things. I'm with you, Shooty. I think Lemecki should be sent deep way more often. He just, maybe it's the slant from Wisconsin still stuck in my head. It seems like he's just faster than a lot of the guys we have out there.
Right. All right. Let's see. Kind of transitioning to the defense here. Who do you think through 2 games has been the standout of the defense, and who do you think the Gophers will need more from going forward? Why don't we start with you, Max?
Yeah, I think the guy who stands out, there's a couple names I had in mind, but I think the one that stands out the most, just from kind of what we were hoping for in preseason, to me is Anthony Smith. And he hasn't really shown up a ton on the stat sheet, but it just feels like every time he's on the field, just because he kind of is getting rotated in, he's not like an every down defensive end. But when he is on the field, it feels like he's just always creating pressure. He's always winning his matchup. There's been a couple interceptions now that he was basically caused the quarterback to rush the throw. And he just looks like a freak on the field, and it's only been 2 games and he's still pretty young. So it feels like he's probably going to get better as the season goes on, hopefully. So to me, it's Anthony Smith, already in a deep defensive end, defensive line group that came as the strength of the defense. But he to me stands out as the guy that's kind of stepped up the most and has definitely made a big impact.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. As far as guys who are MVPs right now, he's definitely up there. And somebody that's benefited from his play, I'll throw out just someone different. I'd go Jack Henderson. The guy's just always around the football as well. I mean, I know the pick was thrown right to him, and I know it was Rhode Island, but he was just shedding blockers like nothing against Rhode Island, and even North Carolina, he was up there in tackles. So he was another great find for the Gophers defense in the portal. He's been great. So I'll throw out Jack Henderson as far as MVPs for right now. For the second part of your question, and let you answer too, Shody, obviously. As far as guys that will need more from, so I looked at this one a little bit differently. I don't know if we'll need more from Devin Eastern, but I think it's evident how important he is to the middle of the defensive line, just because the other guys there haven't had as much of an impact as we were hoping for at this point. Again, it's only 2 games. Jalen Logan Redding is just making the full transition to inside this season. So still obviously some room to go to grow there. But for me, I just think you need Devin Eastern to stay healthy, maybe more than anybody at this going forward, and just to continue to play as well as he is. So yeah, kind of a different approach to the second part of the question, but I think going forward, you're going to need Devin Eastern more than maybe anybody on the defense.
Sure. Boy, this is tough. I've really liked what I've seen from Baranowski actually at linebacker. He seems to have improved a lot since last year. But I think who I'm going to go for is Ja Joyner. I just like to watch him play. Kurt, you say this all the time. It looks like he always gets held every play, but I think over 2 games he's played well. He's had 3 solo tackles, half a sack, and he had that forced fumble as well. I mean, he's getting after it already, and we're going to need that, especially once we go into Big Ten play. So I just like what I'm seeing, and I'm liking what I'm seeing from all the defensive linemen. It's pretty awesome to see what they've been doing so far, but I also feel like they can give us a little more as well. Who do I want to see more from? He's leading in tackles, but I feel like Cody Lindenberg a little bit. I feel like he needs to really be that anchor of this defense, that leader, just a little more. First game of the season, he missed too many tackles. Picked it up this last game a little bit, but from here on out, I just want to see his helmet on every frame after a play. I just feel like he's got to be running wild, almost like a Coy. Just kind of get after the football, make tackles, make some plays, and just kind of be electrifying out there. I feel like missing last season is to its detriment rather than, him being a great player this year, but he can still do it.
I think he's been, especially last game, he was like a half a step away from making like 3 interceptions, it felt like. So I thought last game he did take a big step forward, but I'm with you. He's going to need to stay healthy as well, just so we don't have to test the depths of that linebacker position on this team. I think we saw enough of that last season. Dave chimes in. I have concerns about the offensive line. How about you guys? Yeah, we talked about that kind of towards the start of the show, Dave. But yeah, I think we're all on the same page. It's probably our biggest concern at this point is just the offensive line and their lack of ability to blow guys off the ball. But appreciate you chiming in.
Yeah, specifically that right side. But I feel like once they know what their combination is going to be and they can kind of get in a rhythm like the rest of the offense, then hopefully things work themselves out that way.
Right.
I feel like this is the week to really work those kinks out up front, against this team that is pretty, we joked at the beginning of the year that Nevada might be the worst team that we play this year. And they've actually not been too bad at all. I mean, all 3 of it.
3-0. They could be 3-0 right now.
Yeah, and they've been decided by 3 points or less each game. So when you think about it, they're knocking on the door here. So, but with that, let's transition, fellas. Nevada preview. So Gophers take on Nevada 1-2 at 2:30 on Big Ten Network. Gophers are currently 16.5-point favorites after opening at 14. Fellas, are you surprised how quickly the line moved towards the Gophers?
I am. I know we just blew out Rhode Island, and Nevada's probably seen by a lot of people as just one of the smaller teams, that people are playing in the non-conference season. But like you said, they've been in just really close games. They played SMU really tight. They probably should have won that game. They probably should have won last week against I think it was Georgia Southern last week, right? So they've been playing really well. And I know that they were expected to be bad from a lot of people, us included, who honestly, let's be honest, we just looked up what all the major outlets were predicting them for their conference, which was not high. I didn't see anyone predicting them to finish higher than the bottom three in the conference. So I don't think it was just us that's surprised by how well they're actually playing, even despite the 1-2 record. So for that reason, I am a little bit surprised that the money came in so heavily on the Gophers.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if I'm surprised or not that it moved. I guess I'm just surprised at the fact that we only opened as 14-point favorites. I would have thought we'd be maybe a little bit closer to 20. So I guess maybe for that, I'm not surprised that it moved the direction that it did. But I think the line starting where it did too is kind of like you said, like it's kind of a Nevada's, despite the record, overachieved, especially from being one of the bottom dwellers in college football the last couple of years. But yeah, so I guess I'm not surprised, but I think where the line at right now is probably pretty close to what this game could end up being. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any means.
Yeah. I am surprised that the line moved. It's probably because of, if anyone watched the game, what the Gophers were able to do through the air was impressive, kind of uncharacteristic. I just don't know. This team is different than Rhode Island. They're going to be tough, and I do think that it's going to be a little close for comfort. But I'll touch on that in a little bit. But fellas, what are your initial thoughts on this Nevada squad? And is it a trap game? Anything stand out? Keys to the game, etc.
Well, I mean, it definitely looks like a trap, and especially when you have a look ahead with Iowa coming up next, and then getting announced that it's a night game on NBC against Iowa the following week. Hopefully, no one in that Minnesota facility is looking at social media or concerned with Iowa at this point. So, in a way, yeah, I think it's a trap game. And like you just said too, like Nevada's not. You can't mess with this team. Like you really can't mess around with them. Kind of looking at their roster too. That surprisingly enough, this is a quarterback we've played before. In 2021, Brendan Lewis was with Colorado. He didn't play a ton. He wasn't that great, but that Colorado team wasn't very good either. But now coming with more experience, he's kind of a big mobile quarterback. He's not super fast, but he can kind of use his size well, and he moves decent enough for a quarterback, and he's not like just a drop back and like a statue type quarterback. And just kind of looking at their staff too. So they do have a new head coach, Jeff Chody. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce his name, but he was a co-defensive coordinator at Texas last year, and it seems like he's brought a pretty decent staff with him.
Chody, did you lose Max, or is it just me?
I lost Max.
All right, we lost Max. Don't worry. I got you guys. All right.
He was an analyst at Kansas.
Wait,
am I back?
We got him back. Got him back. All right.
How long was I talking?
Probably 5 seconds.
He was a co-defensive coordinator at Texas.
Yeah.
And then he's back here, and then you cut out.
Yeah, no. Okay. So, yeah, I just said that the head coach comes from Texas. He brings an offensive coordinator who spent time at Oregon, Washington, Nebraska, and then was an analyst at Kansas. So it's a lot of offenses that, a lot of high-powered offenses that he's dealt with. And there's the offense that they run is it's definitely a heavy running offense and a lot of option. So that too, for this defense, like that's something they really have to prepare for and be disciplined with to stop this offensive attack.
Yeah. Okay. So I went above and beyond on this one, guys. Okay. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Kurt, what do you know about Nevada that I don't? You're just a fan, just like me, all right? First thing, watch your mouth. Second thing, I reached out to Jeff on Twitter, who went to Nevada, per his bio, I believe him, and he is a Wolfpack fan. So reached out to him just to get his perspective on this game. I could tell by his Twitter he's a huge Nevada football fan, follows every game, so figured it was good to get his insight. I'm just going to kind of read some blurbs on the team from Jeff's perspective, Nevada Wolfpack fan. So here's what he had to say. Shout out, Jeff. Nevada is a dramatically improved team compared to last year. We're still rebuilding after Jay Norvell gutted the program when he left for Colorado State. Ironically, he took a bunch of players with him and now complains about poaching. That'll happen. We then hired Ken Wilson, who was not qualified to be head coach. There's a reason he was a lifelong assistant position coach. We went 4-20 the last 2 years. Chody, again, I don't know how to pronounce the coach's name either. Anyway, this head coach is different. He's doing well. He's going to do well here as long as he's here, and you can see that with the improvement in player performance this year. The players learned how to win, but there's a reason we are 8 points away from being 3-0. On offense, you need to look out for QB Brendan Lewis. He's an okay passer, but can change the game with his legs. He reminds me a lot of Kaepernick, except he doesn't run like a gazelle. We also have a couple of good running backs that have emerged. Savion Red, who's a Texas transfer, is the best running back of their group. He's got good speed and ball carrier vision. Also look out for Marcus Belton, but he's easy to lose track of and deceptively quick. So that's what you can expect offensively. On defense, you have Drew Watts, who's leading the team in tackles. He's a baller and surprised he wasn't poached by Power 4 programs. Chad Brown and Michael Coates Jr. are really good corners that can lock down good receivers. Nevada's defense is its strength. We held Georgia Southern to 295 yards of offense and 20 points. A week before, they put up 45 points and 500 yards on a good Boise State team. We're lacking in some areas you'd expect from a group of 5 team, like overall depth, team speed, etc. And then he went ahead. I didn't ask for this, but he also gave us his game prediction, which I appreciated. He said, not that you asked, but here's my game outlook. Nevada can beat Minnesota. We would need to play a nearly perfect game and have a couple of takeaways from the Gophers. I don't think it's a game where Minnesota can win on talent discrepancy alone. But we're going on the road, and Minnesota's a good team. I expect a closer game than the point spread, minus 16.5. I think it'll be close in the first half with Minnesota pulling away in the second half. He's got a final score of Gophers 35, Nevada 21. Thank you, Jeff, for the insight. Really appreciate it. Always like getting other fans' perspective because we're our fans giving perspective. So appreciate you there. Okay. Now that we have Jeff's insight, here's what I'd like to add to that. Their defense is their strength, but their offense, I feel like, isn't built to come from behind. You could probably make the same argument about the Gophers. But for me, hearing what Jeff said, one of my keys to the game is this offense has to come out firing. The offensive line has to come out and get some push. They're going to be able to load the box and force you to be two-dimensional, which we were able to do last week against Rhode Island. But the offensive line isn't going to have a cakewalk day. It's not going to be a bounce-back day as far as just based off talent for the offensive line. So for me, starting fast, putting them down a score is going to be important. I'm kind of rambling a lot, and I don't want to go into score predictions yet. So, Shody, I'll let you jump in with anything else you wanted to say.
Yeah, really, that was great insight, Kurt. Thank you for reaching out to him. And everyone, check out, is he part of the College Huddle, Kurt?
He's not, but
maybe
we should record him if he's watching every game. Jeff, start a podcast.
Yeah. All I can really add on to that, it seems like I feel like if our defense plays well, and they have been playing well, it should be a pretty good game for us. The problem is going to be up front. Up front, it just seems like, and like our listeners have mentioned today, offensive line hasn't looked very good. And if we're unable to generate any sort of push, it's going to be much more difficult to beat this team than it was Rhode Island. Our offensive line was struggling against a Rhode Island team, FCS team. if that happens again, I don't know why, this Nevada team will do any worse. They're a better team, so it's going to be a problem. Um, but having said all of that, Nevada's offense ultimately isn't too terribly good. They have struggled to get any sort of offensive going, and I think that that's going to be a big difference here. Um, I think this is going to be a game for Brosmer to just kind of go off, and he's going to solidify our route and just throwing the ball to maybe open up the run game. I hope that PJ really does go for that philosophy, and we'll see what he does. Um, all three of Nevada's games have been decided for 3 points or less, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see how it comes down. We are the most talented team that they've played so far. We'll need to be disciplined. Nevada has lacked some discipline in the past few games with some scuffles. They had 2 personal fouls the last game, which their coach was just saying it was unacceptable. I mean, 14 top penalties last games for 134 yards against Georgia Southern. Had that not happened, they'd probably win the game. But anyways, I just think that, again, the offensive line needs to have a good game. I think it's going to be a closer one than we think.
Before you get the score, do you think it has trap game potential, though?
What's that?
Do you think it has trap game potential, though?
Definitely. I think that every year that we've played, we've been in a trap game. Every year since PJ's been here. Every year since PJ's been here, it's been a trap game. There has been something, or we've lost one.
Self-inflicted traps.
Yeah.
But I do still think that the Gophers land on top. I think it'll be a 28-13 victory for the Gophers. I don't know if that's considered close, but I think it's ugly how it gets there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Max.
Yeah. No, my score prediction is pretty similar to that. I think we win this one 28-10, but I don't think it's, it's not a huge score, but I think it's one of those games I think there's going to be a lot of ground game. So the clock's going to be just kind of running the entire time. Like I mentioned, Nevada with their heavy option run, looking at it, they've been running 58% of the time, which is more than us, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And defensively too, they have played solid defense, a little bit of bend but don't break. Just kind of watching some of their previous 3 games, out of the 3 games, they only have 2 sacks. They've only forced 1 takeaway, and they really don't blitz a ton either. So it's a team that, if we're looking to get Brosmer into a rhythm and get our weapons into a rhythm and kind of figure out who's going to be that number 2 wide receiver and spread the ball around a little bit, this is probably a pretty good game to do it because you're not going to get pressured a ton. It's not a team that's going to force a lot of turnovers. So, it could be something we could take advantage of. They do give up more through the air than they do on the ground. So we'll kind of see. It's another good test, though, too, for our ground game, who has not been the cleanest yet, but we'll kind of see. And I feel like this first quarter is going to be pretty important to jump out to a lead, like you said, Kurt.
Dave Valensky's going 34-14 Gophers. I like that. I would take a 20-point win all day. I think that'd be a really good win. 2 guys, or just 2 points I wanted to point out that Jeff didn't mention in his info he provided. They do have 2 receivers over 200 yards in Jaden Smith and the Braham Jr. guy. So I think that's pretty. I mean, that's way more than we're on pace. I know they've got an extra game on us, but so they do have capable playmakers on the outside. It's not like they don't have athletes out there. And then their tight end also has 2 catches for touchdowns. And his longest reception on the year is only 19 yards. So seems like they, just looking at the statute, that they target him more in the red zone. So pretty typical there. I am a little bit nervous about this one, just with how much I hear and see people already talking about Iowa the following week. And, coaches can say all the right things, but at the end of the day, those players still go back and they check their phones, they check other stuff. I'm not saying they're not going to be locked in. I just think this one's going to be pretty tight. Now, I don't have as high a score as Jeff does, but I'm going 23-14 Gophers. We score late to pull it away, put it up by 2 scores. But yeah, I think we're in for a little bit of a battle. I think it's going to be really tight at halftime, and yeah. But based on what Max said, with how they're sitting back not blitzing, I'd expect a big day for Christian Driver then hitting him underneath with his underneath routes and stuff. But yeah, Shuddy, did you give your score? Yeah, you did, didn't you? Yeah.
Yep, 28-13.
Outing.
Oh, really close
21
one.
goes.
You know, Outing, I could see that happening. I really could. I mean,
the Bowling
hope
Green
it
is in the
doesn't.
back of everyone's mind still.
Oh,
Like, that's
I mean,
always a possibility. We're not trying to just sit here and be negative. It's just
no.
that's the reality. These college football players look ahead.
College football.
One last note, just on, I think you mentioned it, Kurt, that the running back Savion Red, the transfer from Texas, this is going to be a good test to see how much our tackling's improved, because he's averaging like 7.5 yards a carry, and he's 5'10", 215 pounds. So big back,
Oh, yeah.
low to the ground. They're going to feed him. So this is like the perfect test to see where we're at tackling wise.
I like that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for a fan favorite of the show, the weekly Sky U Pod parlay of the week.
It went 0 for 5 or 0 for 3 last week. We just gotta face it. It is what it is. Can we just point out though how unlucky two of those were? The Northwestern Duke under. We covered it on the last one. Under 36.5. It ended regulation at 26 points. Shoulda, you made the right call. You can't help those nerds do anything else. They couldn't help but ruin it for everybody. And then Iowa picked him to cover 2.5 points at home, up 13-0 at half, and just completely went in the tank. Ended up losing the game, which kind of was nice to see once the parlay was already ruined, but just hurting the Sky U Pod parlay overall. Let's see here. Dave chimes in. Who do you think was a better coach getting the team ready for trap games, PJ or Mason? Oh, man.
I don't know.
That's a
the
great
Bowling
question.
Green loss is probably the worst loss
Yeah, but
in our
Mason,
lifetime. It might be one of the worst losses in our lifetime.
Here's the thing, though. Mason never had a defense, so it was just like you could lose to anybody. Yeah. I don't know. Who is better coach at getting his team ready for trap games? I'm going to go PJ. I think PJ overall was probably better. We've probably had a few less hiccups. That's a really good question, though. I'd have to think on that. I want to come back and give a definitive answer, but my gut, just off the top of my head, I'd say PJ.
We'll have to go back and look at the
schedules. I was at many Mason games, too, as a kid.
It does seem like, especially, do you remember the year? Yeah, it was the year that, 2019, weren't those initial games? We played Georgia Southern, Fresno State, and all of them, and they were way too close.
Well, they were all really tight. Yeah, I guess.
So
tight. Do you get credit for having the team prepared if they squeak out the win?
I don't know. I feel like you have to be more convincing against team. You're not. When Dave says who's a better coach at getting his team up.
Beat Ohio State. Yeah, and I think. Is 2000 the last year or 2002? That's one of the last years we beat them too, Ohio State.
Yeah. I don't know. When I hear getting your team up, that means like you're ready to play, and even if you at your best, and if you don't do that well, I feel like you haven't really gotten your team up, even if you win. But we can talk about that some other time.
I like that question a lot, though. That's great off-season content right there.
That is.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, as Kurt mentioned, we went 0-3 last week. We apologize for all you gamblers out there, but hey, that's just as lucky as going 3-0. So
that's true. You could.
We're on to something. We're just not kind of on the right end of it. Boy. I'm going to just start it off, fellas. I'm going to keep starting until I get one. I hope I'm not taking one of yours because to me, this is easy money. Saturday night, 6:30, we got a ball game. UCF is on the road at TCU. And UCF actually on the road are 2-point favorites. To me, that is money. Easy money. But it also screams Vegas knows something that I don't. But regardless, I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs, baby. I think that they can cover the 2-point spread and get my first win of the season. Lock it in, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that's a game I'll be tuning in to now that I maybe wasn't at the top of my radar, but appreciate you for that, Shuddy. I'm also taking a Saturday night game. I'll be honest, there wasn't a ton that jumped out to me that I loved. So when in doubt, you got to go with the best team. I'm taking Georgia minus 24.5 at Kentucky. And I know Kentucky, you're thinking, been a pretty solid program here of late. Here's the thing. I gotta pull this up. Yeah, I can't blame him. Outing says betting the house on UCF to fade Shuddy, which is the play so far this year. Back to Georgia, Kentucky. Kentucky struggled to keep competitive with South Carolina last week, and I believe that game was at Kentucky as well. I might have that backwards. Maybe it wasn't, but I don't think South Carolina was picked to be a world beater this year in the SEC. So Georgia's the best team in the country right now. Kentucky looks like they're struggling. And it's a night game, which always helps the team get up for those. So give me Georgia minus 24.5. I know it's a lot of points. I'm taking the Bulldogs.
Yeah, hard to bet against. I mean, will Kentucky score? Will anyone score against Georgia? That's always the key there. Boy, I had a tough time this week. I feel like there was no game that just jumped out. So I feel like I wanted to find one that was not a huge number, a game that the team's going to get up for. Washington and Washington State play this weekend, the Apple Cup.
Yeah.
At Lumen Stadium where the Seahawks play, and Washington is only a 4.5-point favorite, and I got the Huskies. Washington State coming off a big win in Pullman over Texas Tech. Obviously, they're going to get up for this one. You know, this is like the Pac-12 facing the new Big Ten heated rivalry. Now, Oregon State is also this weekend, which is kind of interesting. That one scares me way more just with where Oregon's at.
Does.
But I'm going to take Washington inside of possession at 4.5. I think they could win by double digits. So
sure, I like that pick.
I was going to actually do that that was my backup, Max, but I was going to go with the over 55.5. I think it's at, because Washington State had scored 70 their first game against Portland State, and then they recently got 37, and then Washington also has been averaging over 30 points. So rivalry game, I was thinking it might sling them, but I'm kind of glad I didn't touch it, and it's all yours, man.
I once again forgot to put the actual games on your sheet, Shuddy, that we're picking.
I actually put some down, and actually Washington State was one of them. Can we still do it as a pick? It's one of the top games. Or
Washington. Going Washington now that we need it.
Yeah, I'm going Washington too as well. So that's one that we'll go with. But yeah, earlier in the day, and by the way, that's our Sky U Pod parlay of the week. Use the promo code SkyUPod. No, I'm just kidding. We're not there yet, but one day we'll get there and get you some free money for our Sky U Pod parlay of the week.
We got to team up with Betty Joe's just south of the border there, going into Iowa, and just host an event there.
Oh yeah, Diamond Joe.
Just take it over.
Yeah. All
right.
Here are our picks for the week. You know, fellas, this week I feel like there's nothing that's eye-popping. Well, there are some good games, but I feel like we've been spoiled the past couple of weeks. But it just reeks of possible upsets, and I'm living for it. But here are 5 games. We already gave you one, Washington State. But early in the day, on Friday night, we have Arizona versus Kansas State. Kansas State, 7.5-point favorites. What are you thinking, fellas?
So here's the thing. I don't know. I thought most of Arizona left with their coach, but they're still ranked 20th. I don't know if that's just leftover from last year. I thought they followed him to Washington. Is
I
that
think they
is
still have
that
their
not what happened?
quarterback, right?
Do they still have the quarterback? Okay. Oh
I
yeah, because
thought
Will
so.
Rogers is there at Washington. You're right. Um, Listen, Kansas State was in a dogfight last weekend. I against was that Tulane? Was that against the
Yep,
Tulane?
the
Yeah,
wave.
yeah. That's a good team though. I just think Kansas State's gonna win, and so that's why I'm gonna pick them to cover. I know it's not a great reason. It's kind of a little bit bigger. There goes my light I had. I just knocked it over, which maybe that means that was a terrible pick. I'm gonna go Kansas State to cover against Arizona.
Yeah. Man, I feel like I could talk into either of these. I think I'm going to go Arizona though, just because their offense is still so explosive. They still have that one, I can't remember his name, but they have a really good wide receiver too. So that could be a difference maker. Kansas State, I don't know. I think they're still seems like they're kind of scuffling a little bit, trying to figure out the new quarterback situation. But maybe this is the week they do it. It is a Friday night game, so I feel like anything could happen. But I'll
Yeah.
just go Arizona.
Yeah. I think that
Um, I,
Kansas State will win. I just think 7.5 is a little too much. I'm gonna go with Arizona covering.
I just want to give our fans and listeners a warning. Currently, through our picks each week, I'm 7-3. Spencer and Max are 5-5. Just letting you know.
Got a long season ahead of us, by the way, Gophers. But yeah, Kurt's dominating. That's great.
That's
The
great.
next game, which is a pretty fun game, Alabama's at Wisconsin. Bama's 16-point favorites. I'll start with this one, fellas. Give me Bama. I feel like this is going to be a classic drubbing. Um, Look, I think Wisconsin under Fickle will definitely improve. Hate to say it, but I just think that it's going to happen probably. But it seems like this Bama team really hasn't skipped a beat since the departure of the great Nick Saban. I think that they're going to continue this domination, and we'll see it on Saturday. I got Alabama over Wisconsin.
It's too obvious. This is the game Vegas is putting out there to get you to bet on and lose. Wisconsin will cover. They're going to lose. But everyone's been talking about Wisconsin's issues. Bama had a little bit of trouble with South Florida last week. I know they did last year as well. But don't forget that Wisconsin got up and played Ohio State real tight last year in Camp Randall. I'm going to take the Badgers to cover. I don't feel great about it, but I'm going Wisconsin. I think this is a Vegas trap game.
Yeah, it could be, but I think Alabama. They had a really scary week last week, and I think between that and then Notre Dame losing, I think everyone's just kind of is on alert now. Like you cannot be messing up this early in the season. And for that, I'm gonna take Alabama just because I think they can score in bunches. They can score a bunch late, and I don't know that Wisconsin's. They've played some close games against some lesser opponents too, so
Yeah.
I don't know. The definitely, obviously, this is like their Super Bowl at Camp Randall. I think it could be tight in the first half, but I'll take Alabama to cover the whole game.
If this goes 55-0 Bama, I'm not going to cry about it.
All right. We also have another interesting game, I think. LSU is on the road against South Carolina. LSU, 7-point favorites. It's an interesting game. LSU has seen, we saw kind of the concerns from LSU's head coach about them just kind of stepping on the gas, finishing games. They haven't really been doing that. But I'm not sure about the South Carolina team. I'm going to go with LSU covering the 7 points. I think this is the week they figure it out.
I'm with you. I think LSU still ticked off over losing the opener and doing everything they can to get at it. Meanwhile, South Carolina feeling pretty good about handling Kentucky last week, so I'm going LSU.
For every reason you just said, LSU.
Wow. That's a 3 for everyone. You can book it.
That's a Gamecocks victory.
Yeah, exactly.
Straight up.
Lastly, we kind of got an old reunion of some old-time foes. Max mentioned it. Oregon versus Oregon State. Oregon is 16-point favorites. You know, even though that, well, before I get into my pick, do they still play each other yearly? Is that still going to
They're
be
going
a
to
thing
try.
or no?
They're going to
They're
try
gonna
and make
try.
it an annual non-conference thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the agreement was, but they signed something, I think, for the next couple of years at least. So
Sure. Well, that's good. Keep some tradition alive, I guess, in this day and age of college football. But, you know, Oregon State last year was very, very good, and this is a rivalry game. 16 points. Boy, the Ducks look really good, but like I said, it's a rivalry game. I don't think it matters. I'm going to go with the Ducks. I think they got the 16 points.
I don't know. And I don't take my advice on this one at all. I just thought Oregon, I know Boise State's good. I picked Boise State to be that group of 5 conference champ to make the playoffs. So I don't know. I just thought they would show a little bit more improvement from week 1 to week 2. Maybe it just needs a little bit more time to cook. Very well could. I think that spread's just about right, but it is a lot of points, and Oregon State, of who's left, is going to want to get back. But then now that I say that, it's like half of them are at Michigan State now too. So I'm going to go the Beavers just out of rivalry sake. I'm going to take the Beavers to cover the spread.
Yeah, this one is puzzling.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Oregon State as well. It's in Corvallis. Oregon coming off a tough battle with Boise. So that's a quick turnaround to then get up to Oregon. I mean, it's still a rivalry game, but I mean, this is a huge game for Oregon State. Probably, I haven't looked at the rest of the schedule, but probably the biggest game that they would like to win.
Yeah,
16 points is a lot, and I'll take the Beavers. They've kept this one close in terrible, terrible years.
Yeah.
Right on. And that's our picks for the week. Well, with that, everyone, thanks for tuning in to yet another episode of Sky U Pod. Again, be sure to check us out on YouTube, X, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please go ahead and check out our partner's website, thecollegehuddle.com, for many more college football podcasts and articles. As always, thanks for tuning in. Leave comments, like and subscribe. We'd like to get you involved in the conversation. Thanks to everyone that joined in on us today, and we'll see you next week. Go Gophers.